This So next is about the cost estimating approaches. And we have introduced the two basic approaches, which is the top down and the bottom up. You want to understand how do you use them to make a very rough estimation. And then we have introduced this work breakdown structure, WBS, and you want to know all the rules. You see the rules here. You want to know how do you use the rule and what the rule means. And then we talked about the typical list of various costs and revenues associated to a business. And you want to understand each one of them, especially the disposal costs, the quality costs, and the market values. And then we learned the different methods to estimate the cost. So the first method is indexing method, which is to use the price indices for different for the price of the same item in different years. And you want to know how do you use this function correctly. Be careful about this label. I mean the years. So you want to make the CN and IN. Do you remember that? To put them at the right position. Okay. And we have one example here. So you want to practice that. In the final, it could be a similar problem, but with different years. Okay, so you want to really understand how do you put the year as a label for the C and I, and where do you put them in the formula. Okay. And then we learned the power sizing model. This is another approach to estimate the cost given the prices for the similar plant or equipment in different sizes. So the size matters. Bigger size has more expensive price. But you want to know how to solve this kind of problem and practice on this exercise. It could be in the final, it could be a similar problem. So for this one, the size is the power of the plant. But in another example or in the final, it could be the size of the land or the size of an office room. Okay, so but you want to know how to use that formula to solve this problem. And then we learned the learning curve model. So learning curve model, you need to understand the ZU is the cost for the youth product, the time cost for the youth product. Okay, and if you want to know the total time cost, you need to calculate out the time cost for each of the product and sum all of them together. That's something you need to be careful about. And then you need to know the n. So u to the power of n, okay? The n is log s over r log 2. And the log s is the s is the learning rate, okay? So don't use s directly. You have to do this second calculation to calculate the n. That's the power of the u, okay? And then we have learned the interest. What is the interest? What is the interest rate? They are different. Interest is the amount of money. Interest rate is a percentage, okay? And then you want to know there are different types of interest. We have simple interest, which is based on the principal. Okay, every time you calculate the interest, it's solely based on the principal. But Of course, you want to rework on this example. And then we learned what is the compound interest. Compound interest is based on not only the principal but also the previous cumulated interests. And so here we have some problem showing this formula, but you need to double check this slide again to see what is the exact formula, okay? And the example, you want to rework it. And also we talk about the interest period. Interest period could be year, month, quarter, day. You have to check the problem, okay? For example, in this case, it's compounded monthly rather than annually. So if it's compounded monthly, you need to know how do you convert the nominal interest rate, the yearly interest rate to the interest rate per month, okay? This is how you do that. Of course, if it's compounded quarterly, you have to use the yearly interest rate divided by 4. Okay, try to understand that. And then, of course, because the interest period is a month, here for 5 years, you're going to have 5 times 12 months in total. That's your N. N is the number of interest periods. It's not just the number of years. This is very important. You have to really understand this slide, okay? And rework these 3 examples, especially the last one, okay? And you want to also work on if it's compounded quarterly or if it's compounded daily. Okay, then the next thing we learned is the cash flow diagrams. The cash flow diagrams, we have been practicing it a lot in the class and in the homework. And now you want to know what are the rules, and those are the rules of cash flow diagrams. So how do you set up the viewpoint? How do you draw the cash flow based on your viewpoint? And then what is the arrows going upward? What is the arrows going downward? And then if for a given problem, can you find the correct diagram? Okay, and try to practice this example. And then we learn how do you convert the cash flow at different time spot to the same time spot, either convert it to the future or convert it to the present or convert it to every year. Okay, so starting from here, you want to know how do you find equivalent values at different times for all the cash flows on the diagram. And this one is to find the future value given A, the future value given P, or the future annuity given P, okay? And you want to know there are equations to calculate that, and there are factor methods. So you can find the factor in the table and without doing all the complicated calculations. And the factor method is more important because that's that's what we have been using very often. So you want to know how to find the future value and the annuity given P, and how do you find the P or annuity given F, okay? And of course, given this type of table, you want to know how to select what factor is appropriate. How do you find the header? How do you find which column? How do you find which row? And then you want to know how to find the P given F, I, and N. Those are all the examples we have the work together, okay? So find the P given F and I and N, okay? We have introduced the formula method and the factor method. And of course, what you want to know is the factor method. And very important, how to use the interest table, okay? And how do you write the factor correctly. Okay. And can you draw the diagrams based on the given condition? Can you draw it on the specific viewpoint, based on the specific viewpoint? And then we learned the deferred annuities, and we said the J is very important. Based on the given cash flow diagram, you need to determine what is the right J so that you can use the formula correctly. You see in this formula, the J and the J here, right? The N is the total number of periods, but the J is something, you have to determine based on when you have the first annuity cash flow. And try to work out this example. It's gonna be a similar problem with a different story, but the method is exactly the same. Okay. And then we learned the nominal and effective interest rates. And you want to know how do you calculate the the effective annual interest rate based on the nominal interest rate. And this is the formula you want to use. You want to know what is R, what is M. R is the nominal annual rate, okay? But M is number of compounding period per year. So M could be number of years, it could be number of months or number of quarters, depending on how do you compound that interest. Try to work out this example, okay? And when you work this, you want to use the formula method, okay? Try to use this formula and see if you can get the correct R and the correct M. And in chapter 5, we learned how do we evaluate the single project. So single project is to answer the yes or no question. Do you want to go with that project, or yeah or no? Does it sound good or no? Okay. To answer that question, you want to use several methods. We introduced the present worth method, PW, right? And we learned the AW, annual worth method, and the FW, future worth method. They're all similar methods. The only difference is to convert the cash flow to a different time spot. So for a PW method is to convert all the cash flows on the diagram to present time, to an earlier time. Okay. And then you want to compare the PW, the total PW, with the zero. If it's bigger than zero, you're going to select that project, or you think it's a sound one. Okay. And try to work out this problem using the PW method. Here is the solution. And here you want to practice it with AW method. Okay, are they the same? Okay, they are different methods. Okay, so you still want to use the PW method. They're totally different problems. But in the final, you're going to see a similar problem, either with this one or similar to this one, but with totally different numbers. Okay. And then we learned the bond rate, the bond value. Okay, the bond concept, you want to understand the meaning of all these terms. What is Z? What is face value? What is C? Redemption? What is R? The N and I? And how do you calculate VN? And this is the formula you use to calculate the worth, the value of that bond. But the really important thing is can you find the correct value of all this N, R, I, C, and Z for a given problem. And you want to be very careful about the interest period. Okay, in our case it's semi-annually, so which means you compound or you get the interest every half year. So if it's compounded or if it's the interest is paid and every quarter, then in a year you're gonna be paid 4 times, and then the quarter will be your interest period. Okay. And how do you calculate R and I? Very important. Okay. It's not just the interest rate given if it's not compounded yearly. Try to rework on this problem, especially for these two items. And then we know we learned the investment decisions we need to make to choose the best alternative among different alternatives, right? And we introduced the investment alternatives, which in where you have all the you have different alternatives, but their equivalent worth either at present or every year or in the future are all positive numbers. So if they all give you positive results, you want to select the greatest one. That's your best solution. And we also talked about the cost alternatives where you have no revenue for doing a project for selecting that alternative. You have no revenue. All you have is the capital investment and then the maintenance fee, the expenditure for operation. But you just have to do that. So this is the must-do project, like the roads and the bridges, all the public facilities. But you still have to do that, and you want to know which one is the least expensive one. So the way you compare is to convert all the cash flows to the present or to every year or to the future. But in the end, what you have is negative numbers. Okay, for negative results, you want to select the least negative one, which means your expenditure is the smallest. And then we talked about the comparison rules once you have multiple alternatives. So the basic rule is you want to make sure the study period is equal to the useful lives of all the alternatives. If not, you have to do some adjustments. And one scenario you can have is the study period is the same as the useful life. And then you don't have to do any adjustment. You just draw the diagrams and convert all the cash flows for each alternative to the same time spot, either present or future or an annual. And then you compare which one gives you the greatest positive number or the least negative number. But in case your and for the first scenario, you want to work on this problem. Okay, so given three alternatives, and you want to calculate what is the present worth or annual worth or future worth, and choose the greatest one. And another scenario is the study period different from the useful life of different alternatives. So these are more complicated, and one of the method we can use is repeatability assumption method. Okay, and to do that, you just need to repeat the whole life cycle for each project, repeat them for several times until they have the same length of study period. So for this one, the 3-year life cycle can be repeated for 2 times, so they have 6 years life cycle for that project, and then you can compare that with the other 6-year alternative. And you want to work on this problem to understand why do you repeat the 4-year alternative 3 times and you repeat the 6-year project for 2 times. Why do you do that? Okay, and in the final, you're gonna see a different alternatives. It could be 2 years and 3 years different alternatives, and then you want to know how do you find the appropriate study period. Just try to repeat them several times and see where they hit the same number of years. And we also learned some methods to treat when useful life is bigger than study period. So we talked about the contract service and the lease equipment method, where you can just stop using that old equipment at the end of its useful life and then start to lease the other equipment for the remainder years. And the second method is to repeat the course of action for several times and then to truncate at the study period. Or you can let the alternative run for one cycle and then you stop using that alternative and you just calculate all the cash flow at that time point and then you reinvest it in another business at the MLR. Okay. And the fourth method is to replace the item with a different item, but that second item should be useful for the remainder of study period, which is very hard to realize. And next we learned the depreciation. Okay, you need to know what is the depreciation, why the business owners all like it, and how does it affect your tax. Basic concepts: what is cost basis, and what is the book value, how to calculate book value is what we learned. So you need to know not everything can be depreciated, and there are 4 criteria to follow, and this is very important. So if for a given property, I want you to correctly tell if it's depreciable or not. Okay. And then we learned about the MACRS method. That's a standard way to calculate the depreciation deduction for each calendar year. And we talked about the 3 steps, and we introduced the 2 tables. So for a given problem, if you know what kind of items or properties purchased by the company, you want to first know which class it belongs to. For example, if you buy a computer for your company, you want to know computer is class 0012. Okay, and then using the GDS method, the useful life is 5 years, or the recovery period is 5 years. So in the final, it could be other items. So you want to always know, like based on the descriptions of assets, you want to know what kind of class it is, and then you find out how many years is the recovery period. And once you know recovery period, you can check this table and find out the rates, the RK, the depreciation rate for every year. Okay. So, and then you would be able to use that rate to time with the basis, cost basis, so you can calculate what is the depreciation deduction for that year. Okay. And please rework on this example. Then we learned the taxable income, and you want to know how do you calculate the taxable income, the formula itself, and then work on this problem, okay, to see if you really understand how do you use this formula. Okay, so that's it, and I wish you good luck on the final, and And I also wish the things we have learned in this class will help you in the future to make the wise decision, not only in work but also in the daily lives.